A 41-year-old prince hiding in a $5 million sun-soaked villa, voice breaking, tears falling, unraveling over a single word whispered from London. No, not danger, not betrayal, just no. And what he did next didn't just rattle palace walls, it exposed something far darker, something that had been quietly building behind the polished smiles and carefully staged appearances.
Harry's gamble has backfired hugely. That decision on his royal protection has been kicked into the long grass, and this has driven him absolutely crazy. I'm hearing that he is spitting feathers about this.
Seeing damage to the British royal family as a result. Honestly, it was so obvious that Prince Harry was using this trip to the United Kingdom as another bargaining tool, as another attempt to bounce his father, as emotional blackmail. And some people were sucked in.
His security team can't manage him, the wife, and the kids coming to the UK. He is more than welcome to give me a call.
The king does not rule this country. He has no power. This is a democracy run by the democratically elected government.
A grown man, 41 years old, sitting in a $5 million house in Portugal, sunshine pouring in, sobbing down the phone, voice cracking, falling apart. Why? Because a committee in London said one word to him, no. And what he did next to his own father is the part that should turn your stomach. And here's where the illusion begins to crack. Because the story being sold publicly feels rehearsed, carefully shaped. But underneath it, there's a sequence, a pattern, a timeline that refuses to stay quiet. And when you follow that timeline, something unsettling starts to form.
Harry's gamble has backfired hugely, and he did not have in his possession the confirmation that he would have armed royal security whilst in the United Kingdom. What he hoped is that by announcing this trip was happening, and of course he's been planning to come for months and months, but by announcing that Meghan, Archie and Lily would come, that he's forcing the hands of the UK authorities.
Forget the spin for a second, because there's been a tidal wave of it. Here's what actually happened. RAVEC, the body that decides who gets taxpayer-funded police protection in Britain, looked at Harry's demand for armed guards on his July trip, and they said no. Not after some agonizing debate, not after a long, fresh review. They didn't even bother running one. They looked at the file, paused the process, and moved on with their day. Paused, moved on, just like that. No urgency, no alarm bells, no sign that anything had changed. And that's the detail that refuses to sit quietly. Because if there had been a real threat, a credible one, it wouldn't have been ignored. It would have exploded into action.
The last times you joined us, you accurately predicted that Prince Harry would lose his battle to restore his automatic taxpayer-funded police protection in the UK. Now, just days before Harry's expected return to Britain, the Royal and VIP Executive Committee, aka RAVEC, has reportedly declined requests for additional security for this trip, throwing into question whether Meghan Markle, Archie and Lily will make the trip after all.
Now hold on, because the reaction from people who actually do this for a living is the interesting bit. They weren't shocked, not one of them. One man who spent 30 years in royal and high-risk protection put it about as plainly as you can. Nothing has changed since Harry lost in court. Nothing. The intelligence services would have flagged a genuine threat the second one appeared. None did. No assassin, no plot, nothing beyond what any famous face on earth lives with every day. Which leaves one very awkward question sitting in the middle of the room. If every expert alive could see this coming, why did Harry behave like he'd been blindsided? Why the meltdown? Why the meltdown exactly? Because this wasn't supposed to be a surprise. Not really. The refusal wasn't the shock, it was the trigger. The moment something carefully planned began to collapse.
So when we look at Harry and Meghan, we can't put them in the same category. And when it comes to the Metropolitan Police providing support, yes, they will provide support on occasions. I've had some A-listers who've come into the country. I've lent over to friends of mine in the Metropolitan Police and said, look, guys, can we work together? Because ultimately we're creating a safe environment. And that's really where it's only justified. So if you've got a top name band or actor who's coming or actress that's coming into London, and that in itself is going to cause real turmoil in amongst fans, obsessives, stalkers, all sorts of people like that, then ultimately, yes.
Stay with me, because the rejection wasn't the catastrophe. It was supposed to be the trap. I want you to watch the calendar with me, because the order these things happened in gives the whole game away. Friday night, the Sussex team sends out a glossy itinerary. Harry, Meghan, Archie, Lily, the full family landing in Britain July 7th through 11th. Hospitals, Invictus events, the lot. A flawless homecoming. Saturday, a flawless homecoming announced before the ground beneath it was even secure. That's not confidence, that's certainty. And certainty like that doesn't come from hope. It comes from expectation.
One source told the Mail on Sunday, on Friday night, the Sussex office issued an operational note saying that the full family would be coming to the UK and they'd accepted a royal accommodation invitation. So Friday night, we're told by the relentless and ruthless Sussex public relations machine, which never sleeps, the trip is on. They're going to stay somewhere like Sandringham. They're coming to the UK and it's going to be a great thing. So that is Friday night.
Barely a day later, the entire thing flips. Harry leaks to his favorite outlets that the security he was so sure he'd get hasn't materialized. And now suddenly, Meghan and the children might stay home. 24 hours. We're all coming home became, well, now we can't. And there's the word that gives it away. He expected armed guards. Expected. That word hangs in the air like a confession. Because expectation without confirmation, that's a gamble. And this wasn't a small one. This was a full-scale public narrative built around something that had already been denied before.
It was Saturday where Harry leaked to the media that he, in fact, did not get the security. The meltdown begins on Saturday, where Harry tells some outlets, I did not get the security that I expected to get. And that, now I'm reconsidering bringing Meghan and the children, which we all know is just Harry and Meghan trying to manipulate the media and bully King Charles into a corner.
A man who got refused in court, refused last time, refused on every previous attempt, somehow walked in certain it would land this time. Certain enough to build an entire family trip around it. Why? Royal insiders think they know. And it's cold. The idea was to let Britain fall in love with a fairy tale first. A lonely grandfather, a king finally about to hold the grandchildren he hasn't seen in years, get the whole country emotionally invested, and then rip it away at the last second with a simple message to his dad. You want to see them? Get me my security. One observer called it what it was. Emotional blackmail wearing the costume of a family reunion. And here's where the entire narrative collapses under its own weight. Because the plan, if that's what it was, only worked if one man bent. Only if the king broke. Only if emotion overruled structure. But that's not how this system works, and that's the part that seems to have been either misunderstood or deliberately ignored.
I think this was the plan all along. It was to sort of build King Charles up and Britain to the idea that our king is finally going to get to see his grandchildren again, and then to whip that away from the king and the nation by saying, well, you still won't give me that gun guard, police armed protection that I need, that I demand, so you won't give it to me. So I'm not going to bring Meghan and the kids back now. I think that Harry actually thought that if he could set up this meeting between his kids, Archie and Lilibet, and the king, that the security he demanded, or he's been demanding now for a couple of years, would suddenly fall into place. He'd get that automatic armed police protection he's always demanded, and everything would be hunky-dory.
That I need, that I demand. So you won't give it to me. So there, I'm not going to bring Meghan and the kids back now. I think that Harry actually thought that if he could set up this meeting between his kids Archie and Lilibet and the king, that the security he demanded, or he's been demanding now for a couple of years, would suddenly fall into place. He'd get that automatic armed police protection he's always demanded, and everything would be hunky-dory. And the UK was only the start. Crack the door open here, and that protection follows Harry around the planet, with the bill landing on somebody else's desk. One flaw in the plan, though, it only worked if Charles folded. Charles didn't fold. But, of course, they've turned around, the authorities here, and said, look, that doesn't make any difference. You're not getting an armed guard. Your British taxpayers are not going to pay for police protection for you mate you ran away. You're not a frontline royal. You're not getting it. Soon as he finds that out, he breaks his father's heart by saying, well, you're not going to get to see your grandchildren after all. What a despicably cruel thing to do to the king. And that's the moment everything turns uncomfortable, because the assumption at the center of all this ridiculous that the king could simply fix it was never real. The monarchy doesn't control security. It doesn't override government decisions. It doesn't bend rules because of family emotion. And yet the entire move seems built on that belief. The king couldn't have done it even if he wanted to. Zero authority. That decision sits with the government, with RAVEC nowhere near the royal desk, which means the pressure wasn't just misplaced, it was impossible. And that raises a sharper question. If the outcome was always going to be no, then what was the real objective here? Because look at the optics. A monarchy already walking on thin ice, trying to distance itself from scandal, from privilege accusations, from anything that smells like favoritism. The last thing Charles could afford was stepping in to reverse a court-backed decision for his own son. That wouldn't look like compassion, it would look like corruption. And he knew it. So he did nothing. And in that silence, everything unraveled. Now step back and look at the contradiction that nobody can quite ignore. Britain is too dangerous. That's the claim. Too dangerous for Meghan, too dangerous for the children, too dangerous to even step foot without armed protection. But then the map opens up. Portugal? Fine. Ukraine? A war zone, somehow acceptable. Nigeria, Colombia, Paris, California, Mexico, no alarms, no breakdowns, no urgent demands for taxpayer-funded guards. Just movement, travel, freedom. So why is the only place deemed too dangerous the one place where security isn't automatically granted? And then it gets stranger. Because behavior doesn't match fear. A man supposedly under constant threat doesn't wander neighborhoods knocking on random doors. He doesn't sit casually waiting for takeaway deliveries. He doesn't move like someone hunted. He moves like someone unbothered. And that contradiction sits there, impossible to ignore. Experts keep circling back to the same conclusion. This was never about safety. It was about status, the spectacle, the motorcades, the sirens, the visual authority of it all, the image of importance, the same image carried by those still inside the system. The same image that signals power without saying a word. And without it, something changes, something visible. Because at the exact same time this drama unfolds, another narrative quietly rises. No noise, no demands, no spectacle, just action. A royal figure climbing 3 mountains in brutal conditions, raising money, showing resilience without asking for anything in return. No convoy, no security debate, just effort. And the contrast lands harder than any headline ever could. One demands protection to appear important. The other earns respect without asking for it. And that's where the public starts connecting dots that maybe weren't meant to be connected. Because when every move becomes a performance, every absence becomes a statement, every decision starts to feel calculated, people stop watching passively. They start questioning. They start pulling threads. Why the sudden shift in plans? Why the emotional pressure? Why the insistence on something already denied? Why the contradictions in behavior? Why the carefully timed leaks? Why does everything feel like it's building toward a reaction rather than responding to reality? And the most uncomfortable question of all, who is really driving this? Because the pattern doesn't feel random anymore. It feels directed, structured, almost rehearsed. A constant need to stay visible, to stay relevant, to stay in the conversation even if the conversation turns volatile. Because in that volatility, there's still attention. And attention in this world is currency. But this time, something slipped. The reaction came too fast. The expectation was too obvious. The plan, if it was a plan, relied on variables that couldn't be controlled. And when those variables didn't cooperate, the mask cracked just enough for people to notice. And now it's hanging there, unresolved. If they come to Britain without the security, the argument collapses. If they don't come at all, the leverage becomes undeniable. Either way, the narrative doesn't hold cleanly anymore. And that's the tension that refuses to settle. Because this was supposed to be a return, a reconciliation, a moment of healing wrapped in public goodwill. Instead, it's become something else entirely. A question with no comfortable answer. Was this ever about safety? Or was it always about control? If you want, I can now turn this into 4 viral YouTube Shorts high retention gossip hooks.